welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're embarking on a journey, not into the usual world of finance charts and numbers,
No.
but into something, well, much more fundamental to our financial lives, our own brains.
Yeah, exactly.
We're going to unpack some really powerful insights from a source that has, I think, fundamentally shifted how millions think about money.
That's right. We're focusing today on Morgan Housel's incredible book, The Psychology of Money.
Such a great title.
It is. And what makes it stand out, really, is that it's not your typical how-to finance guide.
Right.
It's more an exploration of the emotional, psychological, and behavioral sides of money.
Okay.
And Housel argues, pretty convincingly, I'd say, that these often overlooked things are actually way more crucial than, say, the technical stuff you learn in business school.
That's fascinating. So our mission here is to really distill those core ideas, the big aha moments, maybe the most surprising bits from this book. We want to help you listening quickly grasp why your feelings, your own history, your experiences, why they often drive your money decisions much more than pure logic.
Yeah.
Because the core idea here is that money decisions aren't really made on spreadsheets, are they?
Not usually, no.
They're made at the dinner table, or in meetings, or just in those quiet moments between what we want and what we fear.
Right.
Influenced by attitudes, biases, how we grew up, ego, luck,
Yeah.
even just basic survival instincts.
And Housel nails that right at the start with that great quote, "Doing well with money has little to do with how smart you are and a lot to do with how you behave."
Okay, let's dig into that behavior first idea. Starting with how our own unique lives kind of shape our financial lens. He has that chapter, No One's Crazy.
Yeah.
It sounds simple, but what's the key insight there?
Well, it's the idea that what looks irrational to you about someone else's money choices,
Yeah.
it often makes perfect sense if you understand their specific history. Think about someone who lived through the Great Depression versus someone who started working during the dot-com boom.
Totally different worlds.
Exactly. Their experiences with volatility or scarcity or abundance, that's going to deeply color their financial choices. Neither person is crazy. They're just working from, completely different life data.
That reframes so much. It really shows how our own story kind of dictates our relationship with money. And that links directly to Housel's idea about luck and risk, doesn't it? How does he connect those to our personal histories?
Well, he really emphasizes that outcomes aren't just about skill or mistakes. Your personal history shapes what risks you even perceive.
Right.
And what opportunities you even see. And what's interesting is how our brains tend to credit success just to skill and failure just to bad decisions.
You do that all the time.
Yeah, completely glossing over the huge role that luck or unseen risk plays. It's a good reminder that the world isn't always fair, and we shouldn't judge ourselves or others purely on effort.
That makes a lot of sense. It's so counter to how we often think about success, though.
Definitely.
Okay, so if our past shapes our views so much, how do we even define wealth without those biases getting in the way? This is where Housel really challenges us, especially with wealth, is what you don't see.
Oh, absolutely. It's maybe one of the most powerful ideas in the book because it just flips the script on how we usually think about it.
How so?
True wealth isn't the flashy car, the designer watch, the stuff you buy to show off.
Right?
It's invisible. It's the savings, the investments, the money you haven't spent. It's the security and the options that those hidden assets give you.
And he uses the man-in-the-car paradox to illustrate this.
Right.
Could you walk us through that? Why is it so important for understanding behavior?
Sure. So the paradox is this. When you see someone driving, say, a really expensive Ferrari, you rarely think, wow, that driver must be wealthy.
What do you think?
You think, wow, if I had that car, people would think I was cool. You admire the car, not necessarily the person's financial state.
I see.
Housel points out that we often crave respect and admiration more than the actual thing. And here's the catch, spending money to show people how much money you have is the fastest way to have less money. You spend the very resource you're trying to signal you possess.
Wow. That's quite the paradox.
Yeah, it really is.
But what's the takeaway then? This connects to the idea of freedom as the ultimate form of wealth, right?
Exactly. If that invisible wealth is the goal, what it really buys you is control.
Control over.
Your time, your choices, that's the most valuable asset. It's not about luxury goods. It's about owning your own life.
Yeah.
Imagine being able to walk away from a job you hate, or taking time off to travel, or dealing with an emergency without panic because your invisible wealth gives you that freedom. That's the real luxury.
That's powerful. And that leads nicely into another distinction Housel draws, getting wealthy versus staying wealthy.
Yeah.
They sound similar,
Yeah.
but he says they require totally different skills.
Oh, completely different. Getting wealthy often takes risk-taking, boldness, maybe being optimistic, even aggressive. But staying wealthy, that needs almost the opposite. Humility, prudence, a healthy fear that you could lose it.
So like defense versus offense.
Kind of, yeah. It's recognizing that luck can change, markets turn, and you need to protect what you've built. It requires caution.
That's a crucial shift in mindset. And speaking of long-term, let's talk about time and consistency. Housel's chapter on confounding compounding. It really emphasizes how much we underestimate this force. Can you give an example?
It really is astounding. I mean, think about Warren Buffett. Something like 95% of his net worth came after his 60th birthday.
Wow, 95%.
Yeah. It wasn't about genius stock picks when he was 25 necessarily. It was about being a good, consistent investor for, 70 plus years?
Decades.
Housel shows how small, consistent actions, like saving even a modest amount regularly, can balloon into something huge over time. Our brains just aren't wired to intuitively grasp that exponential growth.
It feels like magic, even though it's just math.
It does.
So if consistency is key, how does Housel explain reasonable, rational, and the need for room for error?
Well, he argues you don't have to be this perfect, hyper-rational robot investor, always making the absolute optimal decision.
Which is impossible anyway.
Right. It leads to analysis paralysis or bad timing. Being reasonable is much better. That means being consistent, not panicking, sticking to a plan that works for you, even if it's not theoretically perfect.
Okay.
And that ties straight into room for error, because the future is fundamentally unpredictable.
Always a surprise around the corner.
Always. Housel stresses how vital it is to build in a margin of safety, a buffer, for unexpected job losses, market crashes, health issues, whatever life throws at you, you need that cushion.
Which brings us neatly to navigating those emotional traps and biases. One that really stood out to me was never enough. What's the danger there?
It's that insidious trap of constantly moving the goalposts. Greed, basically. Chasing more just for the sake of more without defining what enough actually looks like for you. Housel says the hardest financial skill isn't getting money, it's knowing when to stop taking risks, when you have enough to meet your goals. If enough keeps escalating, you're just on a treadmill forever.
Never satisfied.
Never satisfied, exactly, no matter how much you accumulate.
And connecting that to the news and media, it helps explain the seduction of pessimism. Why does bad news always seem smarter?
It's a strange cognitive quirk, isn't it? Bad news often sounds urgent, dramatic, implies complexity.
Yeah, it grabs your attention.
It does, and it makes the person delivering it seem insightful, like they see dangers others miss. Good news, on the other hand, is often slow, gradual, maybe a bit boring.
Like watching paint dry sometimes.
Right, so Housel warns us that pessimism just sounds smarter and gets more airtime, even if it's not accurate or helpful for making long-term decisions. It can really skew your outlook.
And then there's the classic comparison trap, you and me, constantly measuring yourself against others financially. What's the real problem with that?
The real problem is it's a recipe for feeling inadequate, or worse, making decisions based on someone else's life, not yours.
Yeah.
You're seeing their highlight reel, the new car, the vacation, without knowing their full story, their debt, their goals, their starting point. It's apples and oranges, and it just makes you feel bad or take unnecessary risks.
It's a destructive cycle.
Definitely.
And it's fascinating how our brains process information, leading to when you'll believe anything.
Yeah.
Howell talks about the power of stories over statistics. How does that play out with money?
Oh, hugely. A single compelling story, a vivid anecdote. It can sway our beliefs and actions far more than pages of data or spreadsheets.
We're wired for narrative.
We really are. So, a dramatic story about someone losing everything in the market or getting rich quick on some obscure investment that sticks with us and influences our decisions much more than, say, long-term market return statistics. Understanding that helps you be a bit more critical when you hear those compelling financial stories.
So let's shift a bit to the author himself, Morgan Housel. Partner at Collaborative Fund, former columnist at Motley Fool Wall Street Journal. But interestingly, not from a traditional Wall Street background.
Yeah, and that's really key, I think, to the book's unique feel and impact. His expertise isn't based on building complex financial models.
It's more observational.
Exactly. It comes from years of writing stories, journalism, and just watching how actual real people interact with money, observing their behavior.
Okay.
And that leads to his writing style. It's very clear, minimalist, almost no jargon. He focuses on these timeless truths about human nature and how it connects to money.
Which makes it very accessible.
Hugely accessible, and
Yeah.
probably why he's won awards like the New York Times Sydney Award. He makes complex ideas feel simple and human.
And the book's reach has been massive, right? Millions of copies sold since 2020, translated into, over 50 languages? It's a constant bestseller.
Absolutely phenomenal success. And I think its popularity stems from that universal appeal.
Yeah.
It speaks to finance pros, but also just to the average person trying to figure things out. It simplifies these really complex psychological drivers into relatable behavior.
Things we all recognize in ourselves.
Exactly, like comparing ourselves or fearing losses more than we enjoy gains. And, the timing didn't hurt either, coming out during COVID when everyone was rethinking money, security, what really matters.
That makes sense. It offered a kind of framework for sanity.
Yeah, in a world that often feels financially irrational.
So wrapping this up for you, the listener, the psychology of money can genuinely shift your thinking. Not just about how you manage money, but maybe more importantly, why you make the choices you do.
It helps you internalize that key difference. Being rich isn't quite the same as being wealthy.
That's a great point.
And it really hammers home that long-term consistency and patience almost always beat trying to be brilliant in the short term.
A very profound shift.
It is.
So, as you reflect on all this, maybe consider this question. What financial belief do you hold right now that might be rooted more in your own unique past, your emotions, rather than pure logic?
Yeah.
And what could shifting that perspective even slightly unlock for your financial future?
It's definitely worth reflecting on, thinking about how these insights apply to your own journey, your own behaviors, your own